We're going to start with the destruction of the temple and go down to the Oslo Accords. And obviously we'll be leaping somewhere we can cover that kind of space. Now, if you recall where we left it last night, is the Zealots were leading the natives of Judea in a revolt. And it hadn't really gone horrible yet. That's how we're going to start. So, that broke out. So is I found was my, I'm changing the slide clue apparently. All our dates, by the way, are AD that we're mentioning, though I do sometimes say it, sometimes I don't. The first Jewish revolt broke out. There were three altogether. While initially successful, it turned into a disaster. The successful Roman response was led at first by Vespasian, but then after Nero was killed and there were a bunch of guys fighting for the throne, they decided that he might be the best emperor, and he was successful. So he seized the throne in 69, and he turned the war over to his eldest son Titus, who conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. He claimed it was accidental, but who knows, in the process. And the war completed. The last thing in the war was the siege of Masada, which for those going on the tour is on our tour. Now, you may have seen, if you haven't been there, you may still have seen signs of it, because the loot from the temple funded public works in Rome, such as the Arch of Titus and the Colosseum. Colosseum is really, I always think it's important because it took them about 5 years to build that. It took them about 6 years to build the parking garage at Clarkson. And I don't think 2,000 years from now we put parking garages are going to be there. So here's a map that's probably totally unhelpful, but you know, if we ever come back and take a look at it, this indicated how the Roman troops broke into Jerusalem. They came in by the Antonia fortress and off to the side, down, and wiped out all sorts of good things. Here's a picturesque 1850 painting of the siege of Jerusalem, which probably indicates it as well, because things were not good. Now, this is a panel on the Arch of Titus, and you can see what they're carrying. Menorah. That's indicating the loot from the temple. There were some other things in there, but obviously the menorah is the most indicative for us. And there's a picture of Masada. Now, those who are doing the trip are all going to walk up all the way up there. Really So, what happened as a result? Well, the pilgrimages and tribute to the temple, which wasn't there anymore, stopped. And that was an important economic as well as religious flow. I mean, Jerusalem it doesn't grow anything, it doesn't really make anything. Its heart, then as now, is as a religious center. And, you know, when we read Paul's letters about the Acts, he was raising funds to send to Jerusalem. Now, the Judean religion started its transition to rabbinic Judaism, except for its Christian offshoot. I always think of it, the Judean religion as basically having two surviving branches: the Christians and what people we call the Jews today. Tradition has the Jewish Christians playing no part in the revolt, but migrating to Pella in Jordan, which is part of the Decapolis, which is mentioned in Mark and Matthew. Amman is one of the Decapolis as well. Now, when you see the map, it's called Philadelphia, but it's the current Amman. So there it is. There's Pella, just across from Samaria, Philadelphia, which is where Ammon. Gadara, that's the Gadarene demon that Jesus drove out of the madman. So, there, see I take the slide again. So, from 115 to 117, the Kitos War, or Second Jewish Revolt, which was largely fought in the Ias, but there was a little bit of fighting at the end in the Holy Land, but it really didn't affect the Holy Land. It broke out between Jews and the Romans. And then the Bar Kokhba revolt, or the Third Jewish Revolt, went from 132 to 136 AD, and it was in the Holy Land. It produced a briefly independent Jewish kingdom, but was eventually crushed. The traditional provinces were renamed Syro-Palestinian, so there's no more Judea and Galilee and Samaria. It was a great loss of Jewish life. Jerusalem was renamed Aelia Capitolina. Aelia was part of Hadrian's name, and Jews, which include the Jewish Christians, which were basically the Christians mostly in that area, were legally banned from coming into Jerusalem by Hadrian. Now you'll see in the story, the Jews are continually being kept out of Jerusalem. There weren't a lot of them around until the 19th century, but I'm jumping ahead to the end. It's a little steep there. After his death, there was some lifting the rules. It is suggested that 580,000 Jews died through war, plague, and famine, and many others sold out of the area as slaves. Now, those are big numbers for those times. So here's two maps that, again, are not really helpful. This is the first one is the first year, and the second one is the second year. About all you can get out of this, the dotted lines are the Romans, and the solid lines are the Jews. In the first one, the Roman ones are coming in and bouncing off. That's the good news. And the last one, they're going right into Jerusalem. They're taking it down. We know a little bit about what was going on, by the way. Associated with the Dead Sea Scrolls are some documents associated with like a lease and so on. When they hit them at the ROM, that was one of the documents they put up. There was a lease given by Bar Kokhba, part of the territory. So, now we're going to jump again. Now the Roman times of trouble, that's when the emperors changed about every 2 years in the 3rd century. The area slipped out of Roman hands because of Parthian invasions to the Palmyrian kingdom from 259 to 272. Two monarchs were Odenathus and his wife Zenobia. You probably have heard of Zenobia. And Palmyrian is Palmyra, which is that area that we were all worried about with ISIS blowing up monuments. Following the defeat of the Emperor Valerian by the Persians. Following the Christianization of the empire by Constantine, the first council, so I jumped about 50 years ahead, the name Jerusalem reemerged because now, Jerusalem mattered, so they renamed it. And it became a senior Christian see. There were 6 of them. Rome and Constantinople and Jerusalem, Damascus, etc. It became a favored region and had a burst of growth. In 326 AD, so 300 years later, Constantine's mother, Helena, a Christian, visited Jerusalem and found numerous Christian relics, as well as establishing the location of many of the sites now designated. So, 300 years later, she found everything associated with this obscure guy that died 300 years ago, including the true cross, the crown of thorns, where he was buried, and so on. So it's up to you whether or not you think she was right. Under Julian the Apostate, who was a nephew of Constantine, and only ruled for a couple of years, the rebuilding of the temple was authorized, and Jews allowed to return. But this ended with his death, which was at the hands of the Persians again. In 438 AD, so another 70 years later, Jews were allowed to return. Now, with all the Jews gone, there was space. And Samaritans had filled much of the population gap left by the destruction of the Jews. But eventually they took their turn being persecuted, leading to a series of 6th century revolts which decimated it. Now, the Byzantines too had a very, carrying on the Roman Empire tradition, which they were, had this nice habit of overturning emperors. And the emperor focused, thrown by killing his predecessor, who had sponsored Croesus into Persia. So this incited the Persian Emperor Croesus to start a war. And he almost won. He was at the gates of Byzantine. There was almost nothing left. A little bit in Egypt, which almost extinguished the Byzantine Empire. In the course of the war, the Persians took over Palestine for 14 years with local Jewish assistance. There must have been some Jews still around. In the course of taking Jerusalem, many places, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, were destroyed. Not for the last time. So here's the Palmyrene Empire for its brief life. And it existed because the Persians had kind of knocked out the Romans, and they kind of were allies until they weren't. Then the Romans came and conquered it. I mean, you know, it's... And here's from an old manuscript showing Helena finding the true cross. And here's a map. I don't know what you're going to get at, but I just thought it was a neat picture. That's how they drew a map of Jerusalem back in the 6th century. All sorts of nice Greek writing and so on. I don't understand any of it, but it's a nice picture, so I thought I'd put it in. So, at this low point, when the Persians have almost wiped out the Byzantine Empire, Heraclius, who ruled from 610 to 641, overthrew Phocas. After a long and desperate war, Heraclius utterly defeated the Persians by 628. Heraclius started the rebuilding of his empire, including the rebuilding of Jerusalem's holy places, such as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So there it's coming back up. However, he was not able, though he tried, to reconcile the Christianity of Palestinian Christians, who, like many in the area, were monophysite. And you had to come to my earlier course for that to mean anything. This is an obscure argument about the nature of Christ. When did his divinity take over? Whether two persons forever or just... But it was a big thing. And Orthodox Christianity was on the two side, monophysite, because mono was one. And while Heraclius was triumphant over the Persians, both the Persian and the Byzantine Empire were totally exhausted. They had come to knife's edge. The Byzantine Empire had almost been destroyed. Heraclius, in turn, had almost destroyed the Persian Empire. And then something, so here's the pink is where the Byzantine Empire used to be before the war started, and the yellow was the edge of the Persian Empire. The blue, the red lines showed where the Persians went. So see, they were right up to the edge of Constantinople, and they came down to the Levant, and then Heraclius came back the other way. So, if he had only died about 630, he would have gotten down in history as one of the great Byzantine emperors. But he didn't have that good judgment. Because in the year 622, which is year 0 for the Islamic faith, and he died in 632. Under his second successor, not very many years later, Arab armies burst, and that's the right word, out of Arabia. They totally conquered the Persian Empire and attacked Byzantium. The crucial battle was the Battle of Yarmouk River in 636 AD, where the Muslims triumphed. Now, I don't know if you can see this. Yarmouk is just a little south of the Golan Heights. It's on the west
north of Jordan. It's just north of Jordan?
I guess it might be in Jordan, but no, yeah, they don't have the boundaries there marked, but yes, it's north of the word of Jordan.
Yes.
It's probably the question you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so it's right in the heart of the territory, and this is what established like the downfall of the whole Byzantine Empire. They never really recovered from it. They retreated back behind the hills or mountains of Anatolia and hunkered down, eventually made a recovery, but not for quite a long time. So, it was conquered in 638, Jews were readmitted, and Christian holy places were protected. The surrender was made directly to the Caliph. He came from Mecca or Medina, wherever he was hanging out, because it was so important both to Christianity and Islam. And the Christians said, we'll only turn it over to the Caliph. And he came and he made these promises, which they kept for a while anyway. You know. Muslims up from 623 to 636 were actually instructed to pray towards Jerusalem. And then only thereafter towards Mecca. And Muhammad was said to have traveled to the Temple Mount and ascended to heaven one night. So that's why Jerusalem is so important to the Islamic faith. And why the Temple Mount is so important to them. So, the Dome of the Rock was completed in 691. The area was at least nominally ruled for hundreds of years by the Caliphate, under the rightly guided caliphs. That's what the first four, that were kind of an independent election. The last of whom was Ali, who was the son-in-law and nephew of Muhammad. Now, the Shiites claim he was the last proper one. You have to be a descendant of Ali to be a proper, or at least of Fatima's wife, to be a proper caliph. So that's the Shia-Sunni difference. The Umayyads, who lasted about 90 years, and the Abbasids. So here is a map of how the caliphate got really big. So we've got Spain on one end, and down in the corner of India, well up north. It started breaking down. It's too big. I mean, one of the problems you have with any of these big empires is communication. It's a long way from Spain to India. Palestine was ruled from Egypt by semi-autonomous rulers for almost a century. Though a little bit in that, the Abbasids got direct rule. Beginning with the Turkish freeman Ahmed ibn Tula, which are, therefore those guys are called the Tulanids. You'll see that on the next map. And ending with the Ikshid. I have no idea how to pronounce these words. I was going to ask Jim, but he didn't really offer. Conquered by the Fatimids. The Fatimids were a group, a Shiite group that started in Morocco, came over, and they were Shia. Reverence for Jerusalem increased during this period, with many of the Egyptian rulers actually buried there. However, the later period became characterized by the persecution of Christians because, remember, Byzantine power had been totally destroyed, and they were just holding on, they were getting raided all the time. Well, times got better for them, and they started coming out and attacking. And so the folks got, the Muslim groups were starting to really worry about this great Christian power. So they, the concept of fifth column was not invented by Franco. So this is called an anachronous map, and it was never actually done. Somebody put it together. There's where the Tulanids were. You can see that they ruled Ar in Egypt. Now the Fatimids, one of the interesting things about them, as I pointed out here, is that their ruling line, after it kind of got thrown out, one branch of it is the ancestors of the Ayad Khad. So, that's how you get good holidays. And so if you know any Ismailis, that's where they claim the right line is. They conquered the region in 970, and it's a date that there's enemies everywhere. And it destroyed Palestine, and it devastated, once again, its Jewish population. And then the Egyptian Fatimid Caliph, because they were the proper Shia caliphs, so they called that. Al-Hakim bi Amr Allah, is that right, Jim? Ordered the destruction of all churches throughout Al-Islam, starting with the churches of Jerusalem, and so the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was among the places worship destroyed. But permission was given by his son for its rebuilding paid for by the Byzantines. And there's their emperor during his various time periods. I won't ask you to look at the colors, but it was a pretty significant little empire. So with the decline of the caliphate, a number of small powers were key players. In the surrounding area, the two big powers were Byzantine Empire, slowly reviving until it reached its second height under Basil II. He was called the Bulgar Slayer, so you could tell he was spending more of his time north. But they reconquered, the surrounding areas around the Anatolian province. So they came down a little bit on the plain, and the Fatimids, who were still a major power on the other side. But a new force was rising in the Caliphate because they weren't powerful enough, so they had to recruit people. So they recruited Turks. The group that mattered here was the Seljuk Turks. Not the last Turks we're going to worry about. But, and initially their incursion in the area was aimed at the Fatimids because they were representing the Sunni Caliph attacking the Shia Caliph. But the Fatimids had a bit of a deal with the Byzantines, so they said, well, we'll kind of keep you busy, and it turned out that they crushed the Byzantines in the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. Alp Arslan, the ruler of the Seljuks, and from 1071 to 1098, they controlled the Holy Land. In 1098, the Fatimids regained it. Those years matter. I know I spent a lot of years, but you'll see that the year 1099 matters. So Manzikert is a little out of our area, but it was the Byzantine Empire really retreated, and it was like its second worst thing before the Fourth Crusade, when a bunch of Christians took it over. So, with the Seljuks looming after the disaster in Manzikert, the new Byzantine emperor, Alexius Comnenus, who was very confident, asked for soldiers from the West. He wanted a bunch of mercenaries or whatever to help him. It's not what he got. He got the First Crusade. And amazingly, the crusade was successful. This was the First Crusade in conquering the Holy Land and much of Syria. However, they promised, they got on sworn oaths, and from the earlier story how much people pay attention to their oaths, that they would, be under Byzantine Emperor. They didn't. So there were four independent states: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli. And the Kingdom of Jerusalem had nominal sovereignty over the whole thing. And the two crusading orders of the Templars and the Hospitallers were also quite independent. Hospitallers are still kind of around, like the Order of St. John claims a descent from a Protestant branch. It's quite a confused history, but as compared to this, which isn't. Jerusalem was conquered in 1099 and held until 1187. The conquest was very bloody. Only the Eastern Christians, the Fatimids, who held the city, thrown out because they didn't trust them. And that was the best thing that could ever happen to them because they survived. And the Fatimid garrison, which made a deal in order to surrender, were said to survive. I'm sure there were other people, because nobody's ever perfect in their mass murder, but they did their best. Some descriptions talk about blood up to the Crusaders' ankle. Now, that would take a lot of blood. And maybe it was just in the Temple area, but it's still a lot of blood. Thereafter, Muslims and Jews were officially excluded from the city, but the history of the Hospitallers Hospital, which is their reason for being, and why it's called Hospitallers, seemed to have admitted Jews and Muslims and treated all equally. So there had to be some around to be treated. And the kingdom survived in some coastal cities until 1291. The title then passed around a number of noble European houses for many years. You'll see people like René of Anjou, who was the king of Jerusalem in 1460. Now, he'd never seen Jerusalem, never was likely to. So here's another map that probably isn't all that helpful, but it shows where all the source of the first Crusaders came, and they came down, they basically came down the land route, and eventually got to Jerusalem and won. The big battle was at Antioch before that. So here is, the yellow is the county of Edessa, which acted kind of as a bulwark, and it was the first to go. The Principality of Antioch, the county of Tripoli, and then the kingdom of Jerusalem. And so right against that, the famine, there's some Armenians hanging out, there's Seljuks all around, and then the purple is the Byzantine Empire. Now, the kingdom of Jerusalem, we always get this thing that, well, yeah, they were there for 90 years. They didn't have any hope, they're just the foreign pimples. They actually did pretty well in the early years. They conquered. And as we'll notice, they almost did a little better. But the other states were less fortunate. Edessa fell in 1144 to the Emir of Oslo. One of his sons, Nur al-Din, captured much of the hinterlands of the other lesser states. He didn't take Antioch itself, but he took all of their territory and was in control of most of Syria. So with Syria under enemy control, the key to Jerusalem, kingdom of Jerusalem was Egypt. And so the kingdom of Jerusalem tried to take control of Egypt. And they kind of did, temporarily. And it came down to a major battle. So, but Nuruddin then sent his Kurdish general, Shirak, who was accompanied by his nephew Saladin, which probably gives away the beginning of this picture story. Amalric first of Jerusalem, who was aided by Emmanuel of Byzantine, a very good Byzantine emperor, tried to conquer Egypt, but finally the Battle of Al-Labin against Shukuk, while technically a draw, ended his hopes. So they were that close. If they had won that battle, they probably would have taken control of Egypt, and they might have been standing for quite a while longer. Eventually, Saladin gained control of Egypt as the first of the Ayyubids. There's a test on all these names. And returned it to the Sunni camp. So he was a Sunni, he was a Kurd too, in this day and age as a matter of some interest. He subsequently took over all of Nur al-Din's territory, and then at the Battle of Hattin, or the Hattin Horns, in 1187, he destroyed the combined Crusader forces and quickly thereafter took Jerusalem. So you can see where the Battle of Al-Labin is. It's south of Cairo. Now, this is the Horns of Hattin. This was the dying, basically, of the Crusader kingdom that they held off in the things. And it was all driven by stupidity, pride, and arrogance. And eventually, Saladin just drew them in, and then he controlled the water. This was in midsummer. They didn't have any water, and they basically died and weakened, and then he wiped them out. Well, I mean, he took some prisoners. So they were desperate to get to the water, lots of charges, couldn't make it. So in 1229, Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Sicily, his nickname was Stupor Mundi, the wonder of the world. And at one time, now King of Jerusalem, he held it to his wife when he died, kind of his son had it, but then he took it back. He negotiated a 10-year recovery of Jerusalem while he was being excommunicated by the Pope. And then he went to Jerusalem and he was crowned King of Jerusalem. So he was the last person, Christian, that was crowned King of Jerusalem. Now the Ayyubids depended on slave soldiers known as the Mamluks. And in 1250, kind of like the Seljuk Turks down below, they overthrew their masters and they established a dynasty of slave soldiers. I put dynasty in quotation marks because they weren't related. They were just, it was kind of an election thing within the elite group. I think there was some relationship between some. They attempted to control extend their control to Syria, but they were immediately met by something that could have ended their entire existence. The Mongols, under Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan. Did you think you were going to get the Mongols? At the Battle of Ain Halut in 1260, the Mamluks inflicted the first serious defeat on the Mongols. By first serious, I mean they had been invading China, Russia, Persia, and they were basically undefeated except for a minor scurvy. But this was a big battle, and it turned them back. So the Ivids had the yellow in here. The kind of brownish things that remain of the Crusader states. The purple is all that's left of the Byzantine Empire. The Almohads, who were basically hangovers from the Abbasid kingdom, controlled Morocco and southern Spain. Not the Abbasids, Umayyads, sorry. And so, well, the Mamluks, look how big that empire is. I mean, you could say how they could be the power, either way. How they could have the power to really beat up on the Mongols. Though it might be worthwhile looking at the Mongol Empire. This part down here is China. So, and there's the battle. There's Jerusalem. So it's not very far from Jerusalem. It's south of Acre. So I don't know if we're going to pass by that one, but it was a big deal. I mean, by 1299, the Mamluks eliminated opposing setters in Levant, including the other Crusader states. Timurlane, means Timur the Lame, was a conquering general, not quite on the scale of Genghis Khan, but approaching it. He raided, but he never had that kind of bottom that Genghis Khan and his group did. The Mamluks reestablished their power until it was ended by the Ottoman Empire. In 1516, Selim I, known by the happy name of the Grim, so it'd be nice to be kind of working for him, I would think, took the Holy Land, and by 1517 he destroyed the Mamluk regime. Though the Mamluks themselves remained as an important group in Egypt, right through the 19th century. So we're really jumping ahead now. Okay, the Ottomans retained power, subject to a brief interruption in the 1830s, by somebody who kind of claimed he was part of the empire, Muhammad Ali and his son Ibrahim, until the invasion by the British in the later days of World War I. Zionism, which of course, is not an old thing. It's a phenomenon of the late 19th century and the early 20th, and of course, still exists today. There were a number of targets talked about for the new home of the Jews, including places in Africa. But Palestine was obviously where they really wanted to go, and was the natural one. And very slowly, Jews from diaspora started to return. They were funded by fundraising from other areas and so on. But there really hadn't been many Jews there because, as we saw, lots of bad things happened. So the British took power in a very cloudy position, as they had made a number of conflicting promises. Promises in this area, and I suppose it's somewhat like, there's lots of examples. So in 683, there's the Ottoman Empire. So it's pretty big. It's well into Europe. They've got Mecca and Medina all along the north coast I guess it's the south coast of the Mediterranean. Now this picture is a little small because you want to get, but that's General Allenby, who was the commander of the British troops in 1917. And he didn't want to go into Jerusalem because he was a good Christian. He wanted to walk in. So he walked in. So let's talk about one of those promises, which is bedeviled the thing. The Balfour Declaration of November 1917. You've got to say the date because there are other Balfour declarations just to make things confusing. Because Donna keeps telling me she looks up on her phone to find out things. So there's more than one Balfour Declaration. And so I thought I'd just quote it here. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by the Jews in any other country. Now, like, it's kind of pro-Jewish, but beyond that, what the heck does it mean? And of course, they were rather inconsistent. The Arabs, those of you who are old enough and watch Lawrence of Arabia film understand all those promises made down to the sheiks and so on that helped out in the First World War. And then there was the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which was made with the French. The Russians were kind of in on it, where they agreed, the two of them agreed to divide up most of the Middle East. The reason why it got out, it's a secret agreement, because it was with the Russians. In 1917, something else happened. It was called the Russian Revolution, and when Lenin took over, he wanted to embarrass the French and the English and lots of other people. So he published a whole bunch of secret treaties, like the Treaty of London with Italy, and there's this one. But it didn't go over well with Americans. Right, Jim?
Still do have a problem.
During the British mandate from the end of World War I to Israeli independence, there was a very large increase in the Jewish population, but they were still a minority. In the late 1930s, there was an Arab uprising against the British. And the Jews on the ground helped them. And one can only think that really helped them because they would have got arms and training and so on during that time period. So when they were put to it in the 40s, they were able to hold out. After World War II, a Jewish insurgency began, led by people like Menachem Begin. And the British decided to exit. A partition plan was authorized by the UN. The UN didn't actually declare a country, but they said it would be okay to be a country. The Arabs, both local and the rest of the Arabic world, found it unacceptable. But the British went ahead because they just wanted out. Kind of like what they did in India with the division between Pakistan and India. So an Arab insurgency was followed by invasions from the neighboring Arab states following independence in 1948. It's interesting, when they declared independence, the first two countries to recognize the existence of Israel were the United States and the USSR. Probably the last kind of thing they did together, I don't know. The Jewish forces were successful, and they ended up taking the assigned lands under the plan, and 60% of those assigned to the Arabs. So it didn't work out that well for the Arabs. And that's when the Palestinian refugee problem started, because the local inhabitants thought, we're in deep trouble, we better run away. And that's where the refugees started. Not the end of it, but it started. So, but most of the Arab land that was left ended up under the Jordanian rule, but the Gaza Strip was under Egypt. And then large numbers of Jews arrived to offset the Arab exodus. So, after the First World War, there was these things called mandates that the League of Nations gave people. And, there were a number of them, and this was that given to Britain to rule, but not to all. So, there's the UN plan. The Jewish state was going to be this mishmash, and the Arab state, and then Jerusalem was going to be administered by the UN and be a joint city. So, from 48 to 67, except for the green ones, it was all basically Israel. The green on your right is part of Jordan, and the green on the left part of Egypt. So in 1956, except for the people died, there was a comedic effort with Britain and France to gain control of the Suez. And they went to war with Egypt. Israel showed how powerful it was, but the French and the British didn't do such a great job, and the Americans drove them out, effectively, by saying, we don't like this. Got very confused because at the same time you had the Hungarian revolt going on, so that made them very nervous of what the Russians, the USSR in the day. In 1967, the Six-Day War between Israel and the Arab countries broke out. Israel was totally victorious, and large areas of land were transferred to the Israeli administration, let's say, the occupied territories. They annexed small parts, around Jerusalem, a couple of places. The remainder remains occupied only, although settlements and military reservations have been steadily introduced in the West Bank, squeezing the local population. I always like to think, anybody remember that first Star Wars movie? Where, you know, the heroes are down the garbage thing and the walls are coming in? That's kind of what's happening to the Palestinians. So this is a little bit from the Suez Canal, shows all sorts of nice movements where the battles were. There's the Six-Day War result. Basically, they've taken the Golan Heights, the West Bank, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Gaza Strip. Now, this is a great map when you get the whole thing. We had it in men's breakfast. You can't probably read. There's a later one that will show it results, but there's not a huge amount of unbroken territory that's under Arab control. In 1973, Egypt, which was led at the time by Anwar Sadat, and Syria started the Yom Kippur War. They tried to jump Israel when it was in the High Holy Days. Their initial successes got all the Arab states excited, and they came on in, and then Israel blew the heck out of them. And then military failure provoked the oil war. Remember all those cars waiting to get filled up and so on? They found they couldn't win with guns, or they thought they'd win with oil. Probably did a pretty good job. In 1977, Sadat figured this isn't going to work. So he very bravely made his dramatic visit to Jerusalem, followed by the Camp David Accords of '78, which was Sadat, Begin, and Carter, and the Egypt-Israeli Peace Treaty of '79, which resulted in the return of the Sinai to Egypt. In 1994, Jordan also signed a peace treaty. A state of war with truces exists with basically everybody else in the region. So, when the Yom Kippur ceasefire was enforced, the Egyptians had taken a little bit of the Sinai, that's the red part, but the brown parts were parts of Egypt and Syria that Israel did, and they gave that back after the Yom Kippur. And of course the Sinai Peninsula eventually went back to Egypt. Here's a picture, a little hard to see probably from the back of the room, but Anwar Sadat's arriving in Jerusalem in November '77. Remember that being a moving moment. And then the Oslo Accords. After the Yom Kippur War, even though this is theoretically a war with Saudi Arabia and all the rest of those people, Palestinians were effectively left on their own. And so in '87, they launched the first, but not last, a low-level, but very effective uprising. It really spooked the Israelis. And in 1993, the first Oslo Accords were reached between Israel and the PLO. These in turn led to the second Oslo Accords, and the creation of the Palestine Authority, a significant, but not sovereign, authority over much of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The authorities had a number of elections in 1996, not always turning out pretty well. And Israel has withdrawn. I haven't read the news today, but from the Gaza Strip, they were threatening to invade a day or two ago. And, you know, this is kind of my understatement. Unhappy situation has not progressed well from this optimistic beginning of the Oslo Accords. So, the red area, this is an easier map to see, is under control of the authority or Hamas down the Gaza Strip. And you can see how it's so cut up by settlements and military reserves and everything else. So even of the area that, that you think of as Palestinian, they don't have that much of it. And it's very dangerous for Palestinians. And I think we've now covered 1900.